Kia ora koutou. Kei te whakarongo mai koutou ki Cobblestones Chronicles. Yep, that's right. I know I'm not Janette, but let's bring her in to present her show from her home. Morena, Janette.
Morena, everyone. Lovely to be back. And thank you, Michael, for making sure that we can go ahead with the program.
Great. So, obviously, just at this very moment, nobody can visit Cobblestones, but we're right on the brink of going down to level 2, I would say. What's the situation at Cobblestones in that scenario?
Level 2 is fine.
Yep.
We just make sure that everyone signs in, that they hand sanitize. We have loads of hand sanitizer. We make sure that we do a good clean, whenever we've had visitors. And we very rarely have over 100 people at any one time.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking forward to going ahead.
All right.
Plus, all our volunteers can come back in then too, because Cobblestones is mostly run by volunteers.
Yeah.
It's and obviously we can't bring anyone in when we have level 3.
Right. So you have
keeping our fingers crossed.
You have a large contingent of volunteers?
We have about I think it's about 140 volunteers on our roster.
Right, that's a lot.
Yeah, so a lot of people. We have probably around 35, 40 people who volunteer regularly. Mm-hmm. But the others are supporters who come and help on an irregular basis.
Right. We
have a whole team who man the front desk on Saturdays and Sundays, which is great fun, actually.
And then there's people like yourself who are not only capable of taking people around, but you've got good knowledge about the history. And I know that you wanted to talk about what it was like to live in that cottage back in the 19th century. How did it come about? Where did it come from, this cottage? Did they build it on site? Did they chuck it on a wheelbarrow? When did all this happen, and what was...
The cottage is delightful. It was gifted to us. It was built around 1867, so about 10 years after the formation of Great Anne. And it was built originally using timber that had been milled just to the north of the town. He bought the land from Henry Williams in 1866 for £5.
When you say he, Mr. Cobblestone.
It was a chap called Hugh O'Connor, who had come over from Ireland, and he lived until about 1915. He married a lovely lady called Mary, and they lived in the cottage. They had 3 children, and it was a really it was a well set up cottage for the time. I mean, goodness, it had an upstairs, 2 bedrooms upstairs, which was pretty good. It has a front parlour, which is decked out in the way a front parlour would have been in the days of the cottage being lived in, complete with piano, rocking chairs, spinning wheel. And, it's really well set up. There's the main bedroom is also downstairs, the parents' bedroom, set up the way it would have been. There's the kitchen, which has a range for cooking on. And I don't know, have you ever used a wood range?
We did have something like that in the kitchen, but it was backed up by a proper stove, so it's not like we depended on it.
Well, I actually learned how to cook on a wood range.
Oh, really?
Because in Scotland, my great aunt that I used to stay with quite regularly, that's what she used to cook on. So I used to make scones quite a lot. That's very particular.
I guess your recipes didn't say things like, begin at a high heat and then turn down to, 150 or anything like that. You went with how hot it was.
Exactly. And it's still relatively easy. I've got a friend who's got a batch, further, an old cottage up further north in the Wairarapa, and he uses his range for cooking when they're there. They also have a barbecue, which is a lot easier to cook on.
Yeah. So that cottage then, initially it was just a family domicile.
Yeah.
Reasonably prominent person in the community, or?
He was a carter. So the cottage was the main residence, and he had a carting business, and they had 3 children in the cottage. There was Ellen, Mary Eliza, and John Hugh, and they were regarded as a very respectable family. But there's a bit of a scandalous story about the cottage. Are you ready for this?
Well, you know what? As with all scandalous stories, it's best if we make people hang on that for a moment. Why don't I play some music while they run through possible scenarios in their heads?
Great idea.
All right.
More about the scandal later.
Okay. Well, I've chosen a bit of music because Janette's not here with her fine collection of local-based music. So I've just chosen a Joni Mitchell track. I thought Blue Motel Room was quite good because I do a program here during isolation called Isolation Blues. And Blue also has a slightly scary feel about it too. I'm not saying it's a scary song, but have a think about this, people. Have a think about what might have been scary about that Cobblestones cottage while you enjoy some Joni Mitchell.
I've got a blue motel room with a blue bedspread. I've got the blues inside and outside my head. Will you still love me when I call you up when I'm down? Here in Savannah, it's pouring rain. Palm trees in the porch light like slick black cellophane. Will you still love me when I call you up when I get back to town? I know that you've got all those pretty girls coming on, hanging on your boom, boom pachyderm. Will you tell those girls that you've got German measles? Honey, tell them you got germs. I hope you'll be thinking of me because I'll be thinking of you while I'm traveling home alone. Tell those girls that you've got Joni, she's coming back home. to contemplate. Will you still love me when I get back to town? It's funny how these old feelings hang around. You think they're gone? No, no, they just go underground. Will you still love me when I get back to LA town? You and me were like American Russia. We're always keeping score. We're always balancing the power, and that can get to be a cold, cold war. We're gonna have to hold ourselves a peace talk in some neutral cafe. You lay down your sneaking round the town, honey, and I lay down the highway. I've got a blue motel room with a blue bedspread. I've got the blues inside and outside my head. Will you still love me when I get back to town?
Joni Mitchell, who I think is one of the most creative people in modern music. Just a wonderful lyricist and wonderful composer all round. All right, well, let's get back because Janette is still there, and you've had time, everybody, to think what this scandalous story might be. Fill us in, Janette.
Well, it's actually quite a sad story in some ways, because one afternoon in April 1882, 11-year-old Eliza Connor was fetching home the family cows after she'd come on the way home from school. And a man named James Ellis abducted and sexually assaulted her and then left her to find her way home. You can imagine the uproar that happened, because Greytown was, of course, a tight-knit community. He had been spotted on Curatapiti Street the next day, but he managed to evade capture until he was captured about a week later. He was convicted 3 months later, and the judge said, your crime is the crime of the brute, and you must receive the punishment of the brute. So he was sentenced to 12 years in penal servitude and to be whipped twice, at each time whipping 30 strokes of the cat of 9 tails.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's a very serious sentence.
Punitive treatment rather than rehabilitation, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And the punitive treatment didn't really work, because although he bore his punishment with dogged determination, a flogging like that would always leave scars on the back. After his release, he changed his name to John Mackenzie, and he worked on the Ridderford family station, where no matter how hard he worked or how hot it became, he never took his shirt off. And his fellow workers noticed this. And one of them in particular, Leonard Collinson, who suspected it might be Ellis, taunted him to remove his shirt. Collinson sacked Ellis for poaching deer and selling meat from the farm. And Ellis took his revenge in early 1904 when he shot Collinson dead. After a 4-day trial in Wellington, The jury found Ellis guilty, and Judge Denniston pronounced a death sentence, which was later carried out. Now, a sad story, and there's at least a partly happy ending, because Eliza, who married cricketer and compositor Herbert Haggett, inherited the cottage and kept it until her death in 1961. Mm. She had rented it out, so many other families lived there, including, I understand, one family with 10 children. Now,
yeah, it wasn't a mansion.
No, as there was 2 bedrooms upstairs for the children, I think it might have been the origin of the song 10 in the bed, roll over.
Yeah.
So it's got a wonderful history in the cottage.
Dark and disturbing in places. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's a true example of what a settler's cottage would have looked like. It was further used as an artist cottage for an artist called James Grieg, and he called it Rookery Nook, and it was moved to Matarawa, where it was his studio, and then it was given to Cobblestones by Stella Bull, who is one of our wonderful philanthropists who has helped keep Greytown in celebrating early settlers. A few more modern amenities these days, but it shows that you can still see when you drive along the main street. You can imagine how it might have looked. And when you go around Cobblestones with our village green in the middle,
yeah,
you can imagine how the whole thing might have looked in the latter part of the 19th century. Although I have to say that when I watch some of our volunteers do the washing the way the family used to do, using the scrubbing board and the tin buckets, I don't envy them. Although having spoken to my husband's aunt, who was born in the early part of the 20th century, and who was the youngest of a large family, of course, because they had more than 10 children. I think there was 12 children in the family originally. She said that one of the things that was an advantage of having a large family like that, who would be perhaps spread out over 20 years, that the older children took charge of bits of the of looking after the family. So apart from, often the boys would help on the farm, and the girls would be in charge of the younger children. They'd be helping to do the washing. They'd be helping to do the cooking.
Yeah, I think that was fairly typical in the day, wasn't it? People had large families. There was a kind of vertical upbringing. Often, as you say, the older siblings took over the jobs of the parents. Otherwise, how did people manage without that kind of structure in place?
I hate to think how long it would take to do the washing for 10 children, plus the husband. So, it's interesting how it's changed.
Even though we think of that as a long while ago, when I was a young student, I did my washing a bit like grape treaders, by putting them in the bath and then standing and swirling and stomping about,
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Hey, I think that sounds very sensible, really.
So at what stage did it sort of move from being a domestic environment to one of historical interest and getting preserved for that purpose?
It was moved onto the Cobblestone site in 1971.
Right.
And it takes pride of place at the front of our section. So you can actually see it from the road. It's one of the buildings you can actually see.
Yeah. Now, Janette, as we near the end of the program, I'm just going to take a punt and suggest that the next time your program comes around, you'll be here, live in the studio again. Today is the day that at the 4 o'clock briefing, we suspect that it'll be announced that we go down to level 2. We don't know, but that's the likelihood. And certainly I'll be sending an email to all of our program makers saying, so long as we observe some degree of social distancing and things, welcome back into the studios.
Good. Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
It'd be lovely to see you in person.
Yeah. We'll do virtual hugs across the room.
Yes, with masks.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Well, look, it's been a pleasure nonetheless that we've able to have this continuity with some of our programs, and great to see you in your home office and that you're still able to talk to us about these really interesting parts of our history.
Thank you for inviting us. Can I just mention to save the date on Sunday, the 10th of October, to all our listeners, because we have a country fair on that day at Cobblestones. And so you'll be able to experience some of the ways that our ancestors lived, the way they lived in the Wairarapa, and see some of the old machinery working, which is always really interesting. And some of our dafter volunteers dressed up in Victorian costume.
Looking forward to the daftness, and I know that you'll be one of the dafter ones.
Yep, absolutely. It's lots of fun.
Oh, great. All right, well, you'll be in again before then, and you can remind people again about that event. All right, well, I hope the rest of your day at Level 3 is a happy and productive one, and by tomorrow we'll look to freeing up somewhat.
Great, I hope so. Yes, I suspect, like everyone else, the garden's getting a lot of attention.
Oh yeah,
at the moment.
Yep. Do you know I took loads to the dump of green matter 3 times yesterday.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
I know. All right. Well, thank you very much, Janette. We'll see you again soon.
Have a good rest of the day.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So that's it from Janette, and that's it from me. We look forward to having all of our normal programs back again soon. So on behalf of Janette, goodbye from Cobblestones Chronicles.